If there's still a few people serving, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your reception for the Secretary. I think that will leave a lasting impression on him. We appreciate that very much. As promised, I was going to interrupt, and here I am interrupting your conversations, and I can promise you it's for good reason. Because our next two speakers are very much on the theme of getting stuff done and making new friends and making ourselves relevant. Jacob Wolf Barnett, I don't know if you've had a chance to meet him or if he's here, but he's been a great addition to our staff as our COO, and he talks a lot about, yeah, where are you, Jacob? Is he here? There he is. Thank you, ma'am. He forces us to be, or forces me, to be intentional about all that we do. And that includes the summit program. There is some thought and logic to the way this unfolds. And we want to learn about and talk about how to win, how to get stuff done. As Douglas told us last year and again this year, we have a seat at the table. Now what are we going to do with it? How are we going to play now we're in the sandbox? I think our next speaker exemplifies that spirit and will give us the answers to that. How to get things done. In short order, I would add. Gabe Klein, if you look at if you Google him, not that I had to do that, but if you were to Google him, look at his Wikipedia profile, the list of accomplishments, if you look at his time in Chicago, finishing Wacker Drive, starting Navy Pier, the Divvy Bike program, BRT, improvements to the Riverfront Trail, the list is long. And you look at everything he started and that happened under his time at the district DOT, it's enough to fill a 25-year career, but it's actually only about a 6-year career in government. It really is quite extraordinary. It is also interesting, he went from DDOT to CDOT. I guess Boston and Atlanta should look out for your next job. But it really is a fantastic record of accomplishment, and it's a great privilege to have Gabe Klein with us today. He is now a visiting fellow at the Urban Land Institute. You remember, we were told to make new friends and work with new people, and that groups like ULI and the realtors were much more convincing, if you like, to be delivering the bike agenda than the bike people. Well, that's why we went out and drafted ULI to help us with the research we presented this morning. So without further ado, Gabe Klein, please come and tell us how to get stuff done.
Thanks, Andy. Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be back here again. There's always such a great energy at the Bike Summit. And before I get started, I just want to comment a little bit on some of the things that the Secretary said. It was a great speech that he gave. And I just think he's so right about the false choices that he talked about, and the fact that when you install a bike lane, the response is, you're taking away space from cars or buses. The fact is that our system, most of the streets on our system are so inefficient that when you put in a new facility, you can't help but optimize them for all modes. And he talked about road diets, and he's absolutely right about that too. A road diet will generally increase the throughput for vehicles. And there's a huge difference between speed and throughput. And in urban areas, we really need to get our head around that and promote that. That's a fallacy, that you want to go faster. And he's also right that the bike is really the great equalizer. And I like to joke that it's cheaper to bike than to walk. And I walked back last night from here to my house in Columbia Heights, and I think I did go through a pair of shoes with assault. It's cheaper to ride your bike all year than to walk. And there are people in Southeast DC here that spend up to 53% of their income on transportation because they feel like they have to own a car because it's the most reliable way they can get to their job. And when you work an hourly job, you can't be late 3 times, you might get fired. And the bike is actually a very reliable way for people to get to work, and we need to promote that fact as well. And then I think he also mentioned that you can't rely on Washington for all the answers. And so that leads into what I'm going to talk about briefly today, which is, I like to say how to get shit done, but how to get things done, excuse me. At the local level, with the tools that we have, you know, would we love to get direct funding to cities or through the MPOs? Of course we would. We'd love to. Is that going to happen in the immediate future? Probably not. So you have to have a plan, and your plan involves the tools that you realistically can work with. And I was talking to Karen about what I was going to talk about, and she said, you know, you've been in 2 different cities. It's actually been 5 years that I've been in public service, and you've gotten a lot done without a lot of government background. So can you talk about that? So like Philip Darnton last night, who gave a great speech. I don't know how many of you guys were here for that, but it was awesome and hilarious. I'll start out by saying what I'm not. So I'm not really a government expert personally. I'm not a planner. I'm not an engineer. I'm not really an activist per se. I'm really a business person who happened to grow up in the bike industry, actually, that cares really about making positive change in cities. And also, I care about trying to maximize the return on investment for our taxpayers. And I think that investing in active transportation infrastructure, and you heard the Secretary talk about the McKinsey study, which I'd love to read, that we could be spending about 60% less on our infrastructure if we maximize the infrastructure that we have. We need to do more of that. A lot of it also is tied into how long we take to do projects. And one of the things I am really proud of is in DC and Chicago, whether it was the 11th Street Bridge here, which we are getting done a year early and $85 million under budget, or the Riverwalk in Chicago, where we went from conception of the idea to design of the project and engineering to borrowing the money through the TIFIA program, closing the loan, going to construction, and building half of it all in the mayor's first term. And the average is about 13 to 15 years for a project of that size, and we'll do it in 4. That saves people money as well. And it makes the change that we need to make faster to save our environment and to rebuild our cities and reconnect our neighborhoods. And that's something else that bikes do that people, I think, don't think about enough. The bike, when we lost the streetcars in almost every American city, we lost the transportation connectivity that really linked the fabric of our neighborhoods together. And when you look at bike share, for instance, and the bike share stations, as mini TOD units, for those of you that are interested in transit-oriented development, and also really are reconnecting our neighborhoods and giving people a viable transportation option that's super cheap, super easy to use, and point-to-point. So, you know, what did we do over the last 5 years? Well, we launched 2 of the biggest bike share programs in the United States, and also started building the bike facilities to support their use. And I would argue, with Capital Bike Share, you've probably seen as much improvement in cycling in the city because of bike share as you have because of bike lanes. We expanded bus service. We planned a 37-mile streetcar system. We started building it. We started or expanded automated enforcement, which is hugely important to make our streets safe. We got people distracted on their phones all over the place. Thank you. And we expanded the system here. A lot of people don't know this, but traffic fatalities of all types have fallen 83% over the last decade in the District of Columbia. And that's with an increase of population, around 3% over the last decade. We've also seen a decrease in motor vehicle registrations of 6% over the last decade. And those numbers have only increased over the last few years. So we have a much busier active transportation system here in DC. And we have less congestion than we've had in probably 30 years. These are all good things. We also overhauled our parking system to make it easier to park, which increased revenues 400% in parking that we're able to reinvest in our bike program and other programs. And in Chicago, we designed a 645-mile bike facility document, the Bike 2020 plan, the Streets for Cycling 2020 plan. And we did it in 12 months. We did it with the public in all areas of the city. And in Mayor Emanuel's first term, we will have built 100 miles of next generation bike facilities. And by the way, we had no budget for any of that. The first 2 years of bike lanes, and we built about 50 miles, we did it all by piggybacking on other projects, borrowing and stealing from other projects. So creativity around funding and moving money is hugely important, and I think having some private sector experience has been very helpful for me in that regard. We also overhauled important public spaces like the Bloomingdale Trail, and for those of you that don't know, this is going to be it's 2.7 miles long. It'll be the longest elevated bike trail in the world, actually, with 37 viaducts. There were people in the surrounding neighborhoods that have been focused on this project for 13, 14 years. When Ram came in and he challenged me to find the money for it, we put together a plan in just a few months. We did the design. We worked with the community. We bought the real estate. And we went to construction, and it'll be done next August, the initial Bloomingdale Trail. So we found $51 million to make it happen. So what's the lesson? The lesson is that where there's a will, there's a way. Whether it's the Riverwalk, the Bloomingdale Trail, the bike lanes. I would actually argue that the funding is less important. I think we get too caught up sometimes on the funding, but the reality is we don't have the will to make the change. And that starts at the top with either the president or the governor or the mayor and the DOT chief. But that's what we need. And so I think we need to think about who are the people that we want to put in these jobs, and do they recognize the importance of livability in our communities? When they're focused on primarily schools and public safety, and those are very important things to rebuild your city, but when you're thinking about public safety, are you thinking about the public safety of your people as they're in their cars or on their bikes or walking? And we're losing, in some of our cities, almost more people to traffic accidents than we are to shootings. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but we have to address both. So I thought, how do we boil this down for people to some really easy building blocks? And I realized it's pretty complex. There's the political leadership, the visioning, there's the sort of cross-functional management challenges you have with the planners and the engineers in your city, always dueling it out. They always think they're right. There's team building to get everybody on the same page. I think it's really important to put focused plans out. And I always joke that I always put out 2-year plans because you don't know how long I'm going to be there. But really, it's because you don't know how long the politician's going to be there. And so you put together a grand vision. Like we have a Vision Zero plan in Chicago. But it's not just saying we're going to get rid of all fatalities for cyclists in 10 years or all traffic fatalities in 10 years. It's saying that we actually have metrics that we're going to hit to get it done, including launching 300 speed cameras, including road diets in every section of the city, and the 645-mile bike lane plan, and all of those things. So how can we all work together to get this done? I mean, I can tell you that here in D.C., WABA was very important, the Washington Area Bicycle Association. DCST, which Matt knows well, the DC Surface Transit Board, which Dan Tangerlini put in place when we originally put the circulator in. And we used that to expand the circulator bus, and hopefully it'll also have oversight of the streetcar. And in Chicago, the Active Transportation Alliance, and I know some of those guys are here, they're just absolutely key to our efforts. You have to build a coalition of support, which is what this is all about. When it came to getting landowners and developers to buy off on the streetcar project, DCST was absolutely essential. When it came to putting in the Dearborn bike lane, and for those of you that haven't been to downtown Chicago lately, we have a 2-way cycle track right through the middle of the city, which is signalized, no mixing zones, it has sensors in it, dedicated turn lanes. We really put some good thought into it. But without Active Trans actually going door to door, business to business, talking to people and basically getting them on board with the project, I don't think it would have happened. So thank you, Active Trans, for that. And that's how people can be helpful. And, you know, it's really, I mean, people like me, I think, have to go into these jobs being a lot less risk averse. And that's a problem that we have. People are worried they're going to get fired. People are worried that there will be political fallout from their decisions, you know, what's going to happen to their career. And the problem is then you don't make the tough choices, the important choices, and you end up with, you know, a long career of not a lot of great accomplishments, to be honest. And I've seen that all too often. You also have to work for great people, as I was saying earlier. I've had the opportunity to work for 2 great mayors. You know, Ram makes no bones about the fact that the bike program is about economics and jobs for him. And some people have said, well, there's really more to it. There's health, you know, and there's safety, and there's fun, and all of these things. But he's being honest when he says, to me, it's about jobs. And when he ran for office and he went around and talked to companies, company after company, startup after startup, said, we want better bike infrastructure. And so he really took that to heart. So it's about people, ultimately. It's not just about cycling. It's about people, and it's about what they want. And, you know, my advice to others out there is to put together, again, a very tight plan, focus on example or pilot projects as much as possible, do them as fast as possible, work with the private sector as much as possible. Our first bike lane, our first protected bike lane went into Chicago within 30 days after we took office. And SRAM put up $15,000 so we could put in the green striping because we didn't have the money or the contract. And so that's just a great example. It's a small example, but it's a great example of how you can collaborate in a moment's notice with the private sector to make things happen. I think we have to focus more on return on investment. You know, as a former business person and I think a future business person, I constantly make this argument, whether it's paving our streets, making sure our streets get torn up less, or building bike infrastructure, which has a much higher rate of return than building roads, as we all know, or that complete streets can consistently have a higher retail return for retailers than auto-only oriented streets. So I think we build credibility with the public at large, with the newspapers, with all of these folks, when we talk about and actually prove that we're making better fiscal decisions with people's money by investing in this type of infrastructure. As an example, Capital Bike Share was launched. The entire system in the region was launched with what it would have cost to buy 2 metro rail cars. They have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rail cars. And we built a new transit system in the city, which is now expanded to, I think, 305 stations in 3 states. And it was initially $1.2 million of DC money that went into that. And I think about $5.5 million worth of federal money. Thank you, CMAQ. Learn how to use CMAQ too, if you have it. Control what you can control with everything, but particularly with funding. What are the pots that you can move around and revise? Is it MFT, motor fuel tax, CMAQ? What grants can you win? Or can you increase revenues, as we did with our parking meters, and use that money to build bike facilities? So there are a million different ways to sort of skin that finance cat. What we were able to do in Chicago is take the transition plan, put together these 5 documents that had very tight timelines to meet, and then put together about a $200 million bike program over 5 years. Again, it was very creative. It was on the fly, but that's what we had to do. And the mayor was all about, like, look, you just got to figure it out. I don't have the answers. I just want to get this done. And luckily, we were able to do that. So additionally, what role can the business community play? Well, I mean, they have more credibility than we do. And when I say we, I mean people in government. And so, again, like in Chicago, Active Trans would get CEOs of major corporations to write op-ed pieces, to talk to local politicians. That makes a big, big difference. Here in DC, you know, if a council member got 20 emails on something, that was a huge, huge deal. When they defunded the streetcar and they got 6,000 calls, I think, and then their email servers got shut down, that sent a clear message. And 4 hours later, the streetcar was refunded. So this stuff matters. There's so much else to talk about, but I'm going to overstay my welcome here. So One thing I also want to mention is the Green Lane project was very helpful to us. You know, the ability to take politicians, business leaders, the deputy mayor of a city over to the Netherlands or to Copenhagen and really show them what can be done, granted maybe over 40 years, but you got to start somewhere, what can be done, made a huge difference. It builds or strengthens relationships that you had, and after that you come back to the US and it's almost like you're in a club together and you understand each other. So props to the Green Lane project. It was very, very helpful to us. And then once you have success in your city, whether it's DC, Chicago, Minneapolis, Austin, there's a whole monkey see, monkey do thing that happens in this country where everybody wants to do it. People come to DC, they see, you know, people, politicians from other places, they see Capital Bike Share, they see our Pennsylvania bike lane, they go back and talk about it and realize that these things are possible. I mean, just a few years ago, there was no 9th Street bike lane in New York City. Times Square was full of cars. The Pennsylvania Ave bike lane didn't exist. We have even bigger opportunities coming up. When you look at what's going to happen with autonomous vehicles, which I've become sort of infatuated with recently once I realized it's really happening in the next 5 years, you know, cars sit 94.8% of the time right now. When autonomous cars come, they'll be active 95% of the time. It'll be a complete flip-flop. People won't own cars, there won't be any more taxis, car sharing, ride sharing, it'll all be the same thing. Now, the reason that's important for all of us is that that means that you're going to have all this space you've been using to store cars that you can do other things with, like build bike lanes. And the car industry is going to eat itself and spit itself out. No, it definitely will. I mean, that's not to say that cars won't always be here and be important, but the business is going to go through huge changes. But this is a huge opportunity for us to build active transportation networks with that space. And I think that we have to be at the table over the next 5 years and really plan for this so that we are driving the bus versus being under the bus, and making sure that we reclaim our city streets for people, and that we all of us have a voice in making sure that that happens. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Hey,
Perfect. Good to see you. Thank you, Gabe. And now Matt Klein, who is the president of a real estate firm locally called Acreage. He's been 28 years in the real estate industry. The relevance particularly today is that he's recently been appointed as the chair of the ULI chapter in the district. Now, for those of you who don't know the Urban Land Institute, it's an amazing resource, an amazing organization, and in Douglas's research, he reported to us that people that know the organization think incredibly highly of it. Not enough people and not everyone does, and they're organized around chapters, and the local chapter is headed now by Matthew Klein, who is going to come talk to us about the developer's perspective. One of the interesting projects I noticed you're working on is the DC United Stadium project. I've got some ideas for some great English football grounds you can copy if you're looking for a design. Thank you, Matthew.
So first point of clarification is, while Gabe and I share our last name, we are not related. And if you Google Gabe Klein and then you Google Matt Klein, you will quickly understand that I am the much more boring, much less accomplished, and much older Klein on this panel. I can say, in the interest of full disclosure, that in addition to my day job from a real estate standpoint, I've been an avid bike commuter for quite a while now, I guess pushing 7 years, 4 seasons a year. And I think Gabe could give validation here, is that our company was the first corporate member of Capital Bike Share in DC. So I am both one of them and one of you, okay? So I want to talk to you about 3 things very quickly that I think are relevant to me when I think about bike infrastructure. One is economics, one is sustainability, and the third, for lack of a better term, I'll call mainstreaming. So first, economics. I think it's important for people to understand, and it may not always be self-evident, that parking in a development project is dilutive to project returns. All right, so let me repeat that again. Parking, as part of the overall economic profile of a project, is dilutive to the overall project level returns. It's really expensive to build parking infrastructure in office projects or apartment communities, multifamily communities. The cost for structured parking in an urban context, even suburban when you think about land, can range anywhere from $45,000 to $85,000 per space. And it's very difficult to get a monthly revenue source that can make that economically justifiable on a standalone basis. So the key point here is, I think within the real estate development community, there is not an inherent incentive, in spite of what people might think, to create a lot of parking infrastructure. It's actually, in my 30-year history, I've never seen a development pro forma where adding parking was not a drag on the overall project returns. So there should be good alignment of interest to create an investment infrastructure to support non-auto-oriented commuting patterns. So I think economics relative to the real estate development arena is an important factor. Second is sustainability. And I can tell you in my career, it's rare to see the level of ascension of visibility of the sustainability movement within the real estate community. We are an old school, slow-moving industry, and sustainability has really taken hold over the last 6 years. So there's two key takeaways within the sustainability element. One is that bike parking is a really easy point in the LEED rating system. So LEED, it's true, I wish it was more than 1 point, and right now it's only 1 point, but for those of you that are not familiar with the LEED rating system, it's a very strong branding element for commercial development. It shows how far up the scale of sustainability you can achieve, and it's 0 to 100, and it's harder than heck these days to be able to build your point total. So you take your layups, and I put bike parking in that layup. So it's relevant not only because it's a point, but because it's also created a great education platform for real estate developers to understand just how easy it is to provide really strong, effective bike parking facilities, both in quantity and quality in a real estate project. So it's been a great education element there. Second is a key driver in the adoption of sustainability practice has come from the user. And I'll use a personal example. We started a real estate development project here in downtown Washington in 2006. We embarked on it to be one of the first LEED Platinum projects in the Washington region. We were fortunate where we got a law firm to sign up for a third of the space within a month or two of starting construction, and we immediately began pitching them on the merits of building out their space in a LEED certified sustainable kind of way. They didn't want to hear anything about it. We hammered them solidly for a year. No progress, until we finally got to their HR person, who was in the midst of recruiting young, top talent millennials at leading universities to come into their firm. And they started hearing from these young law school graduates that sustainability was a characteristic of the culture of the law firms that they wanted to go work for. Immediately, they adopted a sustainability platform and got LEED certified. And for those of you that don't understand the LEED element, if you're a LEED Platinum core and shell, to do a LEED certified interior is not much harder than filing paperwork. So it was a relatively easy move for them to create a branding identity for some of the new young millennials that were joining their firm. So the key point there is, I think what we've seen on the sustainability front is it was really user-driven, which is really what's woken up, I think, a lot in the real estate community, is that the tenants, the occupants of these buildings have said it's an important priority. And the good news, I think, from a bike standpoint is we are now starting to see, on the very, very small way, people starting to say, I want to see your bike facilities when we do a building tour. What a blessing, right? Relative to people understanding what it means relative to their workforce. So I think this is a big step in moving bike infrastructure from an amenity to a necessity in bike facilities. It's got to come from the user. And last, mainstreaming. I struggled with what the right vocabulary was to use here, but I think the point here is that bike infrastructure, both public and private, needs to become more of a mainstream concern for civic influencers. Specifically business leaders, specifically some business leaders and in what I would call old guard civic business groups. In many of these groups that I participate in, the bike crowd is seen as a fringe element. and not necessarily core to the transportation options that these organizations are all advocating for. And I think the more work we do with these old guard business organizations to help them understand and appreciate the role that a complete street, that a fully multidimensional transportation system can bring to the workforce, to the livability in a community, the better we're going to be able to have these organizations right now even just get neutral on the idea of making smart public infrastructure investments in bike facilities. So those are three things that I would take away from a business standpoint that are relevant to us. The economics of support of non-auto-oriented transportation options, the sustainability features, and then mainstreaming the demand. Thank you.
Stay right there. Stay right there, because in the interest of time, I just want to pitch one key question to you, which is, ULI is built around chapters. You're head of the DC chapter. How can we show you our value and help you solve your problems and issues at the local level? What's the best way to connect for a local bike advocacy group or bike retailer with a ULI chapter, using the DC chapter as an example, if you wish?
Well, I guess and you already set this up earlier, I think ULI really is a credible thought leader. It's a non-advocacy organization specifically, but really is, I think, a recognized intermediary in a lot of these kind of issues. I think engaging and becoming members and trying to help create great content for meetings. One of the things that we do as ULI Washington is we've got a phenomenal young leaders. So we're one of the largest chapters in the United States. We have about 1,900 members locally. And almost half of those are what we call young leaders. They're under 35, very active, and they put on great programs, really value-add, industry-leading programs. I think if we create the right kind of advocacy element within a program for people to understand how to create a complete street. Now we've got Gabe at ULI, maybe this is he and I have already collaborated on potentially getting some local resource out of that new move, is I think helping people understand that you can have an effective auto-oriented street that still has bike lanes and other elements. I don't think people understand even some of the basics relative to it. I think they still see the bicycle culture as the bike messenger that's tattooed wearing Birkenstocks and piercings as the mainstream of what biking is.
Yeah. Okay, that's good advice. So make that connection. And Gabe, as a traveling fellow or visiting fellow for ULI, part of your job is to get out there, talk to those chapters, and be that spokesperson for complete streets and these kinds of issues. So take advantage of that, and thank you, Matthew and Gabe Klein, for joining us today.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, that was good. And so to conclude our luncheon, we've got one great announcement to make, or a discussion to have, of a great partnership that we have with Kimberly-Clark Corporation, because the corporate sector, as you've just heard, is critical to get involved and engaged in our work. And for the last 4 years, we've been involved with Kimberly-Clark through the Bicycle Friendly Business Program. And now we are engaging with them with the National Bike Challenge in its third year. And the Bike Challenge, many of you have participated in it. We realized the power of it in our office when in early May, a couple of years ago, the first year we did this, it was a miserable, wet, rainy week, and people in the office kept writing and coming into the office complaining, saying, "This goddamn challenge. I'd be taking the metro if it weren't for the challenge." But we kept writing because we wanted to rack up the miles. We wanted to be part of the total that the league was being judged on by everyone else. So it really is a powerful incentive, and our goal this year is to have 50,000 riders pedaling 30 million miles. And to tell us a little more about the program, I want to introduce John Kayer, who is Vice President of Kimberly-Clark Rolled Products from Appleton, Wisconsin, in the balmy south here. John, come on up. There you go.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Kerr, and I'm the Vice President of Rolled Products for Kimberly-Clark North America. And you might say, why is a toilet paper company here? What does that have to do with cycling? Yeah, there's a roll. I got my roll here. There's a roll, and bikes roll. But I don't get the connection. Well, let me tell you the connection. If you know anything about the Scott Company, it's a company rich in history. And it's a company that its founders were very innovative. In fact, they made bicycles. You see on the visual, it was a bicycle named after one of the founders. It was called the Great Scott, and it was $100 in the late 19th century. That's equivalent of $2,000 in today's money. It was a very high-end line of bicycles. Now, we don't make bicycles anymore, but we do make a lot of other innovative products. In fact, Scott and the Scott Naturals brand was the first to put the toilet paper on a roll. First put it on a roll. This was way back when. And now we're the first to take it off of a roll. The first and only to take it off of a roll. For those of you who are from Philly, New York, New Jersey, you may have seen this product in your local Walmart or grocery store. It's been in test market for the last few years and doing very well. It's a very simple solution for sustainability, and that's what we're all about. And that's the reason why we're so interested in cycling and what we can do to advance the cause, because it is a very simple solution for people to give back and make the environment just a little bit better. Now, you might say, tubes. What, are tubes even a big deal? And, well, let me tell you this. If all the tubes in the United States went away for 1 year, 17 billion tubes would go away. That's 17 billion with a B. That's a lot of extra paper that you don't need to have out there in the environment. In fact, it would fill the Empire State Building 2 times in 1 year. And that's such a very simple thing for consumers to do, and the product works really well. We're the only ones that have innovated in this area, and it's really been a great learning experience for us. Now, those are not the only products we make at Scott Naturals. In fact, we make a lot of products with recycled fiber, another good thing to do for sustainability. And I want to show you a clip that demonstrates this.
I'm really sorry for hacking into your system, but it's the only way we could meet in secret. To keep this confidential, I'm going to assign you a code name. Sparrow, I've got an important mission for you. Check it out. Notice anything different? Exactly. It's Scott Naturals bath tissue, made with recycled fiber. The quality is so good your family will never notice the difference. But the environment will. Which brings me to the reason I had to breach your system. Sparrow, you're being recruited to go on a mission. The secret swap. Swap out your regular rolls at home with Scott Naturals, but don't tell anyone in the house. They'll never notice, and that's the point. Oh, and Sparrow, this meeting never happened.
All right. But I show you these not to be commercial, but to give you examples of how we're trying to give simple solutions for sustainability for consumers. And this one is particularly close to us because the toilet paper market, these natural type products are only 2% of the market. Only 2% of the market. That's ridiculous in today's day and age. It should be a huge percentage, and Kimberly-Clark is going to work to change that. So, thank you. Now we're going to work to change that with innovative employees and innovative solutions. And I wanted to share with you today an innovative solution around cycling. And everyone can see this picture on the screen here. One of our employees is in the upper left in yellow, and that is Rob Gusky. And I want to give a shout out to Rob. Rob, if you could raise your hand. Many of you know Rob. He is a passionate supporter of this. You know, my first day at Kimberly-Clark was a couple of years ago. I think he was in my office on day 2, talking about how important this is and how we need to drive it further. And I can tell you, he's being heard. This is some other pictures, but he was really the architect of the Get Up and Ride Day. All started back in 2008 when the price of fuel was through the roof, and he and some of his colleagues decided, hey, let's drive to work, or let's ride to work every day on our bike. And I can tell you, rain or shine, Rob is out there riding every day. And this winter has been particularly tough, Rob. Good for you. But we have a lot of support. The picture in the middle is our CEO, Tom Falk, and he's come to every Get Up and Ride Day. And the picture in the lower right is the Scott Naturals brand team. So a lot of good advocacy. So where did this go from here? Well, it started in Wisconsin in 2011 in association with the Wisconsin Bike Fed. And then we extended the challenge to the rest of Wisconsin. And I want to have a shout out today to Dave Cheslevich. Is Dave here? Dave? Dave, you helped start this all. Thank you very much. Give him a round of applause. Okay. From Wisconsin, it went to the rest of the country. In 2012, we went national, working with the league to organize and host the National Bike Challenge. And as Andy said earlier, you know, our initial 2013 numbers were 35,000 riders, 18 million miles, and the goal for 2014 is 50,000 riders and 30 million miles. Now, all that is a lot of collection of great riders out there, but we also like to recognize individual riders. And this is one of those individual riders that we recognized, and that's a year's supply of Scott Naturals. That's a lot of great TP she's got. Maybe more than a year, maybe more than a year. Now, we also like to recognize advocacy groups, and I want to have a shout out to Elizabeth Reincourt and Damon Hershey. Are you here in the audience? Let's give them a round of applause. Their group last year received first place in the 2013 National Bike Challenge. And for that, we're giving you a grant of $500. There you go. Okay, so where do we go from here? How do we raise the game? How do we take this movement to where it needs to go? We're going to go out to other corporations. Kimberly-Clark's been a real believer in this, thanks to Rob and his colleagues, but we need to get that same level of commitment from other companies. And so this year we're going to create the Scott Corporate League. You see all the logos of other companies out there that have interest in this, and we want to help encourage that interest to go to the next level. It really is an easy way for those large corporations to be involved and get us to that big goal we have for this year, and I think we can really blow by that goal if you get a few of these big companies to really get behind it like Kimberly-Clark has. And next year on this stage, at this event, we will recognize the winner of the Corporate League Challenge. So what can you do is my last slide here. And what you can really do is you can sign up at the challenge, nationalbikechallenge.org, and you can encourage a friend to sign up. That will help us go a long way. And if you have any ties to corporations, big corporations, please let us know that as well, because we would like to encourage them to move this forward. So with that, I want to thank you for all you're doing to drive cycling, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to allow me to speak here today on behalf of Kimberly-Clark and the Scott Naturals brand. We've got one more. I've got another thank you and another challenge. And this one is for Andy.
Uh-oh.
Thank you for all you're doing. And the challenge is we would like you to participate in the Scott Naturals Get Up and Ride Day this year. So this is for you, Andy.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Count me in. Thank you very much, John. I will not wear this to the Hill tomorrow, but after that, I will put my Lycra on. Thank you. The website is up and running right now. I got my email announcing it today. So go check in and register. Start logging your miles May 1st. There's a really important role for state and local advocacy groups to play in getting involved in the challenge, and I encourage you to take that opportunity. There's great things this year. We've got 3 new apps that interface with the site: Endomondo, Map My Ride, and Moves. You can still log your miles manually. The official start is May 1. Runs through September 30th, but it's great to get going in the warm-up period. And as Summit attendees, this is your sneak preview of what the new website will look like. And thank you to the current sponsors. Particularly recently, we've added Sierra Nevada, 3M, and Wells Fargo to Scott Naturals and Kimberly-Clark. And there is space available on this slide. So talk to Lily if you want to add your name to that. It's a really great way to inspire people to get out and ride. We really appreciate the support of Kimberly-Clark, Rob's leadership, and encourage every one of you to get involved in the challenge this year. With that, we need to get off to our workshops. I want to thank you all particularly for your participation with the Secretary. I think you got a great perception of who we are. And there's some awesome workshops, and we will see you back here at 4:30 for your final marching orders before your visit to Capitol Hill. Thank you very much.